Happy Friday. Good day. Good. Welcome back. It's Friday, the 17th of February. I have uh, updated the description on the last video reading of chapters 20 and 21 to include a link to the Ray Noble song on YouTube that Janine uh, Mitch's wife had sung to Morrie on their last visit. We're in coming really, really close to the end. This is going to be a really quick reading today. And you're probably thinking, what's the challenge? Well, here he talks about forgiveness in the second of the two chapters that we're reading today, chapters 22 and 23. And so the challenge would be this. It's kind of twofold. The first part will be what is forgiveness to you? Meaning, like, how do you view forgiveness? Is it one of those type of deals where you think it should be forgive and forget, or forgive and beware, or be wary of a situation or a person or a family or a situation or whatever? So that's, or three, forget and remember. Well, I was going to say and remember for future reference, but that's kind of like forget and be wary. Or three, you determine what you would call it. Forgive and whatever, and then define that. Since it's twofold, the second part of the challenge would be this. I'm sure that Morrie's going to describe a situation in which he either asked for forgiveness or granted forgiveness or didn't grant forgiveness. I don't know, because I haven't read it yet. So part two would be, how would have you dealt with that situation that he talks about? Whether it was him forgiving somebody or somebody forgiving him, or maybe him forgiving himself. Who knows? But that's the two challenge. That's the two-part challenge for today. So let's get right into it. Chapter 22 is the audio visual part 3, and the 12th Tuesday we talk about forgiveness. Oh, and did you get your drink? I'll take a little drink real quick. The Nightline crew came back for its third and final visit. The whole tenor of the thing was different now. Less like an interview, more like a sad farewell. Ted Koppel had called several times before coming up, and he asked Morrie, "Do you think you can handle it?" Morrie wasn't sure he could. "I'm tired all the time now, Ted, and I'm choking a lot. If I can't say something, will you say it for me?" He didn't cough in the book, but I just thought, anyhow, no. Koppel said, "Sure." And then the normally stoic anchor added this: "If you don't want to do it, Morrie, it's okay. I'll come up and say goodbye anyhow." Later, Morrie would grin mischievously and say, "I'm getting him." And he was. Koppel now referred to Morrie as a friend. My old professor had even coaxed compassion out of the television business. For the interview, which took place on a Friday afternoon, Morrie wore the same shirt he had on the day before. He changed shirts only every other day at this point, and this was not the other day. So, why break routine? Unlike the previous two Koppel-Schwartz sessions, this one was conducted entirely within Morrie's study, where Morrie had become a prisoner of his chair. Koppel, who kissed my old professor when he first saw him, now had to squeeze in along the bookcase in order to be seen in the camera lens. Before they started, Koppel asked about the disease's progression. "How bad is it, Morrie?" Morrie weakly lifted a hand halfway up his belly. This was as far as he could go. Koppel had his answer. The camera rolled the third and final interview. Koppel asked if Morrie was afraid now that death was near. Morrie said no. To tell the truth, he was less afraid. He said he was letting go of some of the outside world, not having the newspaper read to him as much, not paying as much attention to mail. Instead, listening more to music and watching the leaves change color through his window. There were other people who suffered from ALS, Morrie knew, some of them famous, such as Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist and author of A Brief History of Time. He lived with a hole in his throat, spoke through a computer synthesizer, typed words by batting his eyes as a sensor picked up the movement. This was admirable, but it was not the way Morrie wanted to live. He told Koppel he knew when it would be time to say goodbye. "For me, Ted, living means I can be responsive to the other person. It means I can show my emotions and my feelings, talk to them, feel with them." He exhaled. "When that is gone, Morrie is gone." They talked like friends, as he had in the previous two interviews. Koppel asked about the old asswipe test, hoping, perhaps, for a humorous response. But Morrie was too tired even for a grin. He shook his head. "When I sit on the commode, I can no longer sit up straight. I'm listing all the time, so they have to hold me. When I'm done, they have to wipe me. That is how far it's gotten." He told Koppel he wanted to die with serenity. He shared his latest aphorism. "Don't let go too soon, but don't hang on too long." Koppel nodded painfully. Only 6 months had passed since the first Nightline show and this one, but Morrie Schwartz was clearly a collapsed form. He had decayed before a national TV audience, a mini-series of a death. But as his body rotted, his character shone even more brightly. Toward the end of the interview, the camera zoomed in on Morrie. Koppel was not even in the picture. Only his voice was heard from outside it. And the anchor asked if my old professor had anything he wanted to say to the millions of people he had touched. Although he did not mean it in this way, I couldn't help but think of a condemned man being asked for his final words. "Be compassionate," Morrie whispered, "and take responsibility for each other. If we only learned those lessons, this world would be so much better a place." He took a breath, then added his mantra: "Love each other or die." The interview was ended, but for some reason, the cameraman left the film rolling, and a final scene was caught on tape. "You did a good job," Koppel said. Morrie smiled weakly. "I gave you what I had," he whispered. "You always do." "Ted, this disease is knocking at my spirit, but it will not get my spirit. It'll get my body. It will not get my spirit." Koppel was near tears. You done good." "You think so?" Morrie rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. "I'm bargaining with him up there now. I'm asking him, do I get to be one of the angels?" It was the first time Morrie admitted talking to God. The 12th Tuesday, we talk about forgiveness. Forgive yourself before you die, then forgive others. This was a few days after the Nightline interview. The sky was rainy and dark, and Morrie was beneath a blanket. I sat at the far end of his chair, holding his bare feet. They were calloused and curled, and his toenails were yellow. I had a small jar of lotion, and I squeezed some into my hands and began to massage his ankles. It was another of the things I had watched his helpers do for months, and now, in an attempt to hold on to what I could of him, I had volunteered to do it myself. The disease had left Morrie without the ability even to wiggle his toes, yet he could still feel pain, and massages helped relieve it. Also, of course, Morrie liked being held and touched. And at this point, anything I could do to make him happy, I was going to do. "Mitch," he said, returning to the subject of forgiveness, "there's no point in keeping vengeance or stubbornness. These things I so regret in my life. Pride, vanity. Why do we do the things we do?" The importance of forgiving was my question. I had seen those movies where the patriarch of the family is on his deathbed and he calls for his estranged son so that he could make peace before he goes. I wondered if Morrie had any of that inside him, and a sudden need to say, "I'm sorry," before he died. Morrie nodded. You see that sculpture?" He tilted his head toward a bust that sat high on a shelf against the far wall of his office. Huh, I had never really noticed it before. Cast in bronze, it was the face of a man in his early 40s, wearing a necktie, a tuft of hair falling across his forehead. "That's me," Morrie said. "A friend of mine sculpted that maybe 30 years ago. His name was Norman. We used to spend so much time together. We went swimming. We took rides to New York. He had me over to his house in Cambridge, and he sculpted that bust of me down in the basement. It took several weeks to do it, but he really wanted to get it right." I studied the face. How strange to see a three-dimensional Morrie, so healthy, so young, watching over us as we spoke. Even in bronze, he had a whimsical look, and I thought this friend had sculpted a little spirit as well. Well, here's the sad part of the story, Morrie said. Norman and his wife moved away to Chicago. A little while later, my wife, Charlotte, had to have a pretty serious operation. Norman and his wife never got in touch with us. I know they knew about it. Charlotte and I were very hurt because they never called to see how she was. So we dropped the relationship. Over the years, I met Norman a few times, and he always tried to reconcile, but I didn't accept it. I wasn't satisfied with his explanation. I was prideful. I shrugged him off. His voice choked. Mitch? a few years ago, he died of cancer. I feel so sad. I never got to see him. I never got to forgive. It pains me now so much. He was crying again, a soft and quiet cry, and because his head was back, the tears rolled off the side of his face before they reached his lips. Sorry, I said. Don't be, he whispered. Tears are okay. I continued rubbing lotion into his lifeless toes. He wept for a few minutes, alone with his memories. It's just the other people we need to forgive, Mitch, he finally whispered. We also need to forgive ourselves. Ourselves? Yes. For all the things we didn't do, all the things we should have done. You can't get stuck on the regrets of what should have happened. That doesn't help you when you get to where I am. I always wished I had done more with my work. I wish I had written more books. I used to beat myself up over it. Now I see that never did any good. Make peace. You need to make peace with yourself and everyone around you. I leaned over and dabbed the tears with a tissue. Morrie flicked his eyes open and closed. His breathing was audible, like a light snore. Forgive yourself, forgive others. Don't wait, Mitch. Not everyone gets the time I'm getting. Not everyone is as lucky. I tossed the tissue into the wastebasket and returned to his feet. Lucky? I pressed my thumb into his hardened flesh, and he didn't even feel it. The tension of opposites, Mitch. Remember that? Things pulling in different directions? I remember. I mourn my dwindling time, but I cherish the chance it gives me to make things right. We sat there for a while, quietly, as the rain splattered against the windows. The hibiscus plant behind his head was still holding on, small but firm. Mitch, Morrie whispered. Uh-huh. I rolled his toes between my fingers, lost in the task. I'll wait for that to finish. Okay, it's done. Mitch, Morrie whispered. Uh-huh. I rolled his toes between my fingers, lost in the task. Look at me. I glanced up and saw the most intense look in his eyes. I don't know why you came back to me, but I want to say this. He paused and his voice choked. If I if I have had another son, I would have liked it to be you. I dropped my eyes, kneading the dying flesh of his feet between my fingers. For a moment, I felt afraid, as if accepting his words would somehow betray my own father. But when I looked up, I saw Morrie smiling through tears, and I knew there was no betrayal in a moment like this. All I was afraid of was saying goodbye. Okay, we're going to a flashback of sorts. Okay, hold on for a second though. I'm not looking forward to the next few chapters, guys. I'm really not. I've picked a place to be buried. Oh, where is that? Not far from here, on a hill behind a tree, overlooking a pond. Very serene. A good place to think. Are you planning on thinking there? I'm planning on being dead there. He chuckles. I chuckle. Will you visit? Visit? Just come and talk. Make it a Tuesday. You always come on Tuesdays. Right? We're Tuesday people. Right? Tuesday people. Come to talk then. He has grown so weak so fast. Look at me, he says. I'm looking. You'll come to my grave to tell me your problems? My problems? Yes. And you will give me answers? I'll give you what I can. Don't I always? I picture his grave on the hill overlooking the pond, some little 9-foot piece of earth where they will place him, cover him with dirt, put a stone on top. Maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few days. I see myself sitting there alone, arms across my knees, staring into space. It won't be the same, not being able to hear you talk. Talk. He closes his eyes and smiles. Tell you what, after I'm dead, you talk, and I'll listen. Yeah, just one more final reading. And I'm going to do it this weekend to get it over with. But not to forget. So, again, the challenge today was already stated earlier. But one of the other things I was just thinking of now, reading near the end, was do you talk to those that have passed on and ask them for whatever, like reassurance, deeper knowledge, answers to particular questions? Ask for company. Trust in their company, being there with you. And do you ever visit grave sites? I don't do so much anymore. I never really knew what to do when I was there. I guess you have to go with a plan. So that could be an extended challenge, is those last two questions. Do you speak with those who have passed on, and what might you speak about And then two, do you visit graves, or if you would plan on visiting a burial site or a place where some ashes have been scattered, what do you do while you're there? It's good to have a plan. So the plan is to finish this book this weekend, and then I will be starting. Where did it go? The Magician's Nephew. Oh, here it is, by C.S. Lewis, because I had promised a few folks that I would be reading this every Friday, and I didn't make good on that promise. So actually, there'll be a couple books that I'll be reading simultaneously, this one and another title. But so stay tuned if you like C.S. Lewis, and we'll get back to being better by doing better. Be better, do better.